My name is Alexandra Bissia, and I'm a doctoral student in chromosome and developmental biology at Brasenose College at the University of Oxford. Today I'd like to talk to you about stem cells, a unique category of cells present in all animals, and in fact many other organisms too. Stem cells are a particularly interesting tool to the medical community because of the great therapeutic potential that they have for several diseases. In this video, firstly, I will give a brief overview of what the properties of a stem cell are and how these properties are employed to produce all the cells of the body during development of the embryo and all the way through adulthood. We will also explore the different types of stem cells that we encounter in the body at various stages of life and how these behave differently from one another. And finally, we will discuss some of the diseases that stem cells are being actively studied for as potential therapeutic agents. So firstly, what is a stem cell? Stem cells have two defining properties. Firstly, they can undergo an indefinite number of cell divisions to produce more of themselves, and secondly, they are able to produce numerous types of cells which typically don't divide themselves but rather perform a specific function in the body. A variety of stem cells exist in our body at different stages of life, and each has different roles and capacities. We will discuss these in a bit, but firstly, I want to introduce some basic concepts to make sure everyone's on the same page. Firstly, when I refer to tissues, I mean a group of cells in the body, most often physically connected, which have specific properties and functions. Cells make up tissues, and one or more tissues then make up each of our organs. Secondly, the term potency. This is a term that describes the ability of stem cells to give rise to different cell types, and depending on the number and variety of cell types that they can produce, they have different names. Totipotent stem cells can produce all cells in the body at the start of embryonic development, and additionally, the tissues outside of the developing embryo, such as the placenta. These tissues are known as extraembryonic. The fertilized oocyte, known as the zygote, is totipotent. As embryonic development progresses, potency generally becomes more restricted. Stem cells can be pluripotent, meaning they can produce all cell types of the body, but no longer extraembryonic cells. Later in development, we encounter multipotent stem cells, meaning that they can produce a few, usually closely related cell types. Multipotent stem cells are generally responsible for contributing cells to a particular tissue or organ. Stem cells can finally be unipotent, producing a single differentiated cell type. This can be seen in a bit more detail in the schematic of the mouse embryo development, although things are quite similar in human development. You can see the gray totipotent zygote at the top, giving rise to the placenta in blue, and slightly later to the pluripotent embryonic stem cells in pink, from which the embryo itself will arise. With the progression of time, cells become specified to a particular fate. They may become ectoderm, mesoderm, or endoderm cells, and these terms literally translate to outer skin, middle skin, and inner skin, respectively. The term skin here is used metaphorically because the actual skin that covers you and me is only produced from the ectoderm. Neurons of the brain and spinal cord are also ectodermal in origin. The mesoderm gives rise to many other organs, including muscles, bone, cartilage, blood, and the cardiovascular system. Finally, the endoderm produces the gastrointestinal system and all the organs associated with it, like the lungs, liver, and pancreas. Therefore, ecto, meso, and endoderm correspond literally to the positions of the cells inside the developing embryo, and also to some extent to the position of the resulting organs in the final product, the fully developed organism. This brings me to the concept of differentiation itself, which I've basically described above. It's the process by which cells acquire characteristics specific to a cell type and lose the ability to divide indefinitely. In the image is a famous sketch by British developmental biologist Conrad Waddington, depicting his so-called developmental landscape. This essentially compares a stem cell to a ball at the top of a hill, which has the potential to roll down several paths. This is a direct equivalent to the stem cell's potential to assume a variety of final identities. However, once the ball rolls down the hill, it can't climb back up. Similarly, a differentiated cell type is not generally able to acquire an alternative fate anymore. At this point, using all the information from above, and maybe with a bit of guesswork, I'd like to set you a small challenge. what types of cells can be produced from the following three stem cells? Firstly, a pluripotent embryonic stem cell. Secondly, a multipotent hematopoietic or blood stem cell. And finally, a skin stem cell. I suggest you pause the video, jot down some ideas, and we can go through each case afterwards. So as I mentioned earlier, embryonic stem cells are pluripotent and can therefore produce all cell types of our body, ectodermal, mesodermal, or endodermal. As for a multipotent hematopoietic stem cell, that will give rise to all cell types present in our blood. These will include red blood cells, but also cells of the immune system, such as T and B lymphocytes and macrophages, but also cells that have to do with clotting blood in the case of injuries, such as platelets. Finally, a skin stem cell is unipotent and it produces skin cells. As adults, however, we find that if one of our organs suffers serious injury, it can't always be repaired. But if stem cells produce these organs, and stem cells can divide forever, what's going on? Many stem cells do theoretically have the ability to divide forever, but they are often needy and require specific conditions, and these conditions are called a niche. If this niche is lost, then the stem cells eventually differentiate without having the ability to maintain themselves, and so are lost from the body. This is why certain organs cannot fully regenerate themselves. We won't go into that extensively though, because we will focus instead on those stem cells that do remain in the body throughout adulthood. In particular, tissues and organs which suffer constant wear and tear require constant replenishments of cells that die, and this is done by stem cells. What tissues do you believe require constant replenishment by stem cells in the adult? Pause the video now to write your ideas down, and we'll go through some answers afterwards. Some cells in our body that have extremely rapid turnover are blood cells. Red blood cells survive for about 4 months, whereas certain immune cells only live between 1 and 5 days. They need constant replenishment, and this is done by blood stem cells which reside in the bone marrow. Skin cells also need to be replenished every 3 to 4 weeks. The cells lining our stomach and intestines also have it rough, what with the constant processing of food they carry out, and the mechanical wear and tear that this results in. Gastric and intestinal stem cells, respectively, ensure that old dead cells are replaced as frequently as necessary. We are additionally constantly growing hair, and what else could be able to do that other than a hair follicle stem cell? Finally, the cells that produce the pigment in our skin, known as melanocytes, are quite sensitive and are also frequently replaced with the help of stem cells. A characteristic of some of these cells, of some of these stem cells, although they're present in our bodies throughout most of our lifetime, some will become depleted in old age, explaining why people often lose their hair and get much paler skin as they age. So if you wrote down a particular cell type that I haven't mentioned here, it doesn't mean it's wrong. There is just too many types of stem cells for me to cover. I recommend doing an internet search to see if there's any information on adult stem cells for a particular organ or cell type. We've discussed the variety of stem cells and their functions in the developing and developed body, but what else can these stem cells be used for? The scientific and medical communities have been interested in them for decades as a source of replacement cells, when cells in our bodies become damaged or die and are not naturally able to regenerate themselves. What types of diseases do you know of or can you imagine might lend themselves to being targeted by stem cell therapy? If you pause the video and think about it, we can then discuss it in a bit more depth. Right, so the types of diseases that are generally targeted by researchers with stem cell therapies are degenerative diseases, where due to old age, genetic causes, or even an accident, a tissue or organ has suffered damage that is not reparable by the body itself. The liver, for instance, may develop cirrhosis or scarring due to alcohol abuse or due to genetic factors. Kidney failure also affects millions of people around the world. These diseases are under investigation for stem cell therapies, with the only solution for these currently, other than long-term management of symptoms, being transplantation from a donor, which leads to lifelong immunosuppression of the recipient to avoid rejection of the organ, and often years-long waiting lists to even get a transplant. Stem cell therapy trials are also underway for neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, as well as age-related macular degeneration, which affects vision in older people. Finally, genetic disorders are also potentially treatable with genetically edited stem cells that are reintroduced into the patient's body. It is now possible to remove differentiated cells from our body and with particular manipulations return them to an undifferentiated pluripotent state, much like the state of embryonic stem cells. These can then be further manipulated in the lab to assume a particular differentiated fate, which nowadays can be done for dozens of cell types with great precision. These cells are called induced pluripotent stem cells, and many potential therapies exist based on the use of these and other stem cells. Other stem cell-based therapies involve removing cells from a patient's body, editing disease-causing genetic errors, and reintroducing them into the patient. This is the case with skin stem cells for the disease epidermolysis bullosa and with hematopoietic stem cells for thalassemia. To recap everything we've covered in this video, stem cells are cells with the ability to self-renew and also produce differentiated cells of the body. Secondly, different stem cells are present in the body at different stages of life, each with their own capacity and function. Finally, stem cells can potentially be used to treat a vast array of diseases, with hundreds of clinical trials currently being run around the world. I would like to leave you with the following questions to consider. What other diseases can you envision being targets of stem cell-based therapies in the future? And also, what potential problems can you imagine arising from them? We didn't discuss this in the video at all, but like any other treatment, poorly researched or badly administered stem cell therapies may have detrimental side effects. We haven't even scratched the surface of the topic of stem cells, so if you're interested to find out more, then I would like to leave you with some additional resources, including 2 great TED Talks, which actually touch upon the potential problems that stem cell therapies may present, a paper giving an overview of the current status of stem cell treatments, as well as the American National Institutes of Health website on stem cells, which gives you a great overview. I hope you've enjoyed this and found it informative, and thank you very much for watching.